The Arts presents Commons, the podcast.
Commons. Hi, Commons is a podcast series about communities. These set of roles that produce the we and therefore the others. So, what is it? Why do we need it? And maybe much more. How can communities give us the same comfort and softness without reproducing its exclusion or suppression mechanism? In other words, how can communities be in line with our non-binary way of living, thinking, and being? In the coming episodes, our four hosts, Faris, Kim, Gabi, and Nanouk, will have a few guests over for dinner. And we do what we do. Talk about the we and the us. So grab something comfy and maybe a glass of your favorite drink and let yourself be amused. In today's episode, we will talk about communal identifiers. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So lovely that you're here. Thank you for being here. This is the first installment of our podcast, Commons, presented by The Arts, Vienna. Our first topic is going to be communal identifiers, which in short could be anything that the bubbles you see yourself in, and bubbles are manifold. You can be in an artist bubble, you can be in a queer bubble, and they overlap, of course. There can be national bubbles, they can be bubbles of class. What our observations are, what our first impressions are of the bubbles we're around. We're going to keep it light, we're going to keep it cute. We're having a very relaxed atmosphere over drinks, over food, and just sharing and caring, right?
Yes. I'm having Prosecco.
So before we go any further, I missed my chance to introduce all of you. And I would love to have just hi, who you are, what's your name, what you do. Who wants to start? Oh, Kim.
Okay, hi, I'm Kim. I'm interested in queer feminist topics, and I would say that common identifiers are also revolving around that, and I really identify with people that kind of are also aiming in that mindset. I'm a theater maker, I would say, and yes, I'm happy to be here.
Yay.
We're happy you're here.
My name is Masha. I am a graphic designer, and I think I'm saying my profession because I really identify myself a lot with what I'm doing.
Oh, that's cute.
I'm within the graphic design. I am very... It's a weird way to put it, but I think I'm very, very interested in very conceptual type of design. And by that, I mean not the way design is being done, but the topics that are being highlighted. And I mostly work within exhibition design field, and I also do. It's very technical, but I'm doing lots of websites, and I'm basically just working with art institutions most of the time, and people from art field, and just do different interesting projects that have interesting subjects and interesting people involved.
I had the pleasure to have Masha as a director, me working as a performance artist. Hi, my name is Nanouk. And what else is there to say? Yeah, I studied theater and a little bit of painting, and see myself working as a transmedial sort of performance person. Sorry for the sound. Fantastic. Gabriel?
Who am I? That's a good question. My name is Gabi. I to describe myself as a Latin American fashion stylist, multicultural marica.
A little introduction for our listeners. Marica.
Marica is in Latin America, we don't use the word queer because we see it as very colonial.
Very true.
So we use our Spanish word marica, which is non-binary being that is against the patriarchy. So it could be kind of the same as queer, but it's not.
Okay. But like also like, like Spanish can be also colonials.
Of course, it's a colonial language in Latin America. Of course it is. Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah. But like maybe you can just...
But maybe not. Queer is the imperialistic word. Because Spanish is colonial in Latin America, but English is the imperialistic language.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
And you, Faris.
That's why we
dear
all speak
Faris.
it right now.
That's why we all speak English. That's why we're sitting in Austria speaking in
We'd be like,
English.
fuck imperialism as we are speaking English.
Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Faris, Cuchi, Gezahegn, Gabriel, but you can call me Cuchi.
Cuchi.
Cuchi. It's not Cuchi, but it's Cuchi. I am like so many things, but I feel like also like I can be so many things. I am so many things, and I will be so many things, and I want it to be so many things.
We are evolving.
Ever evolving. But I'm an intersectional LGBTI/human rights activist advocate. I also is performance arts that manifest in so many different ways. Audio visual, stand-up comedy, dance, da. I also call myself a style activist as well. Because I use the medium of fashion and like clothing, makeup, and these attires as a means of tool for me to have conversations with a very heteronormative world on a daily basis without me talking to them. And then I'm also it's so surprising for people, but I'm also like an IT, like a computer science guru.
What?
Yes,
Really?
I work as an IT expert for nonprofit US-based organization when I was back home, and the only reason I did it is because because I can do it. Okay, because I was smart, but no. But the main reason I wanted to do,
You can code.
Yes, I actually graduated in computer science, minoring software design, and then blah blah blah, and then I also did a certification for Microsoft IT professional, but those life are over. Because the main reason I wanted to go to that route was I wanted to be financially independent away from my parents so that I can just be my true self, my true queer, flamboyant self. And then the only way I could have see was for me to just use education as escape. So, and then I use education as escape. And then I said okay, I graduated university. Then I need to just have an income that really give me a lot of power, which is sadly in this capitalistic world that we're living, money plays a role. And then also being anti-capitalist and then anti-money is not equal, okay? When I say I'm an anti-capitalist, that doesn't mean I don't need money, bitch.
Yeah.
So,
I think that goes for all of us,
yeah. So I did that. That's the only reason.
You just shown the whole complexity of the planet Earth right now.
Yeah.
You covered all the topics.
Yeah, that's
We
the
are
main reason.
anti-capitalist living in a capitalist society.
Well, yes, we're daily are coerced and conditions, and yeah. So that's the main reason I did it. Yeah, but I don't love it anymore, especially after I came to this global north space. I said no more of that. Yeah.
To open up the conversation, I would be super interested to hear your very first impressions. I don't want to know the bubble you're referencing. I just want to hear the first thing that comes to your mind that defines your bubbles. It could be in terms of looks. It could be in terms of behavior, just the first thing. And we can maybe all together think about what bubble it might be.
So for me, it would be caring and talking a lot.
That's true.
I think for me, communal identifiers have to be more. I'm more of a visual person, so I think communal identifiers for me have to do more about the visual aspect. I see you. How someone looks and presents themselves, because how someone shows themselves in society has many connotations and communicates a lot. So for me, that is the first thing I go for in communal identifiers.
For me, I think it's like two things. It's lifestyle and tiny bit of a political aspect, but not in a very serious manner. Because I think I'm surrounded by heavy workaholics. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe not unfortunately, but that's just a matter of fact. And I'm also surrounded by people that deal a lot with different artistic topics. So I would say it is a very left type of circle, even though I didn't choose that. But I think that's what is present within artistic institutions. It's just there.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I think it manifests in so many ways, which are like in line with life generally for me. Because, for instance, I totally identify what you said, Gabi. Like visual is also very important. Like like when I see people. I mean, like, the visual represents not only just visual, but also like, the way you're vibrating and the way you're presenting yourselves and moving through the world, and how that is resonating for me really depends. I mean, like really, like indicates the communal identifier for me. I find communal identifier in a space of like where like there is food, in a space of where is like drinking. I find communal identifier. It might probably goes into also the visual aspect of it, but also like in fashion and in like the way people dress up. I find the community identifier also like in a political setting, like a setting that is really challenging heteronormativity in every aspect of it. When I say heteronormativity, is the way it's manifests, like from patriotic, from capitalistic and supremacist point of view, how that heteronormativity manifests, and then what kind of like what kind of body are challenging that. So like that would be like for me like one of an identifier. Like if I see you in one of the demonstrations saying like fuck heteronormativity, I was like, oh, I see
Absolutely.
you, that's mine.
But that goes hand in hand with, I think, also the visual aspect. You are well aware if you see somebody that protests the heteronormative sort of patriarchal sort of viewpoint, just by you can visually identify them.
I mean, like when I say also like the fact that I also included all these other communal identifier is because I mean, like visual can be also superficial, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So like
100%.
Yeah, but like when you just add it up, like with actions, all different kind of things and all that, then like it makes a whole lot of sense for me.
But something resonated with me, what you said, that communal identifiers in the community, especially this idea of revolving around food and music, that is one big identifier for various minority groups. That, for example, if someone is a migrant, they will feel drawn to towards certain type of music, towards certain type of food, and feel more at home in those type of contexts.
As Masha already had like a little bit of an introduction to what she considers her own bubble to be in her own community of like sort of left-wing art space, heady art space, I would say. What would you describe your bubble to be? I mean, you've already touched on a topic that you feel most comfortable in the queer feminist space, and that the discourse about queer feminism is important to you.
Well, it doesn't really need to be a discourse, so I wouldn't say that it is about this theoretical stuff so much, but about more this mindset of, okay, we kind of have the same understanding what we would like to achieve and to change and to fight for that. But I also just realized that I feel most comfortable in speaking and having a space where I can speak my mind and have the feeling that the other person is accepting me in that way or is kind of thinking the same way. And I think I realized when you before were talking about those visual aspects that I think I kind of rather fall into the heteronormative setting, to be honest, like how I style and so on. So I would say that for me, identifying is not so much about like the visual aspect, but rather really taking time and getting to know a person. And
this, for the listener, is said by a woman in a 80s blouse that is golden,
Yes,
black and gold, with fantastic earrings. But beyond that, I totally understand. You already brought it up that you see a common identifier of your group to be communication and respectful communication and care, which I think is essential.
It just, for me, I think it just takes a lot of time, of course, and like a process of like finding this way of communication. Of course, one can adapt really fast and like meet a person at it like day one, and then they can identify. But I think for me, it just me and like how I feel relating to this community, I would say just takes more time.
Which I really think is a great identifier of the Flinter community, you know, is care, is...
Flinter, when you say, what's that? Who is she? Who's Flinter?
Please explain the acronym Flinter.
Can I just add one thing before, just because it's connected to what you said? I think it's also, I think it's also a tiny bit overrated, this connection between the outlook of a person and how the person works, functions, and deals with different topics. Because, there's plenty of examples in fashion, and, in fashion is just the most obvious case, I would say, when a person applies one principle in its work, and then the visual outlook is not really matching with what the person does. And not with that. No, I'm not talking about that right now. I was just talking about like visual aspects in work or mindset or whatever it is. Because I think sometimes people just don't build that connection in themselves, and it's totally fine to not have it, because some people are very solid in the way they work and in the way they live their life and the way they look. But some people have a very clear division between different aspects of their life. And I think it's also totally valid to not be one solid self. Yeah.
The form of my community identifier is, it's always like change from time to time. But at the moment is like, I'm just seeking this, comfort. Like, a body folks, like, in their daily life, in their political educations or practice, or like, just living body that are really like, willing to give a space for other people to just truly be themselves in a way that is not hurtful, filled with softness, love, tenderness, and kindness, and protections to one another.
How do you see that applied? Like the people you surround yourself with, what are the actions they take to show that? Regardless if it's, I'm not talking performative, what are the things the nonverbal communication, for example, goes in?
It's like, for me, It just goes into, for instance, a very simple, like, a person can be like cis and heterosexual, and then but it's still like, check himself, herself, their selves. Because I believe also, like, heterosexual can be non-binary as well. And then, but like, for instance, like, really check their privilege, because I also believe, like, privilege is such a non-binary and fluid reality, and each and every one of us in a different context hold that privilege, and a person recognizing that privilege and then making sure that privilege is used to bring ease to other human beings. Like, for instance, currently we're going through a very difficult time in a context of Europe because of this conflict. And if a person, like, for me, then, like, when a person does, like, I have my room and or my place, I can just be, like, away for 2-3 days, and then, like, people that are fleeing from this hurtful place can use my place, and I'm, like, providing this softness and welcoming energy to the body that really, like, trying to save themselves. Then, like, that's my literal, like, like, actionable of the softness and tenderness that a human being sharing for another human being, despite all of these things that really built by white supremacist, capitalist, and patriarchic violence system that separates us. Yeah. So for me, it's like, such an like, an antidote that really, like, undo all of these things. So yeah, it's just, like, just to be practical of what I said. Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like the absence of it is also, I mean, it's not about blaming social media or whatever, but I feel like sometimes the absence of what you're describing is also a lot provoked by this feeling that social media is giving you, that you're taking an action constantly if you're producing any type of content there. And sometimes producing a certain amount of content gives you this feeling of participation,
Something, yeah.
which afterwards makes you do not take an actual action in the physical space and
absolutely.
provide people with physical tenderness and not only the one within the social media. And it's not bad or good, it's just a matter of fact, I feel like, because I think it's also like it's this whole problematic topic about bias and stuff to, blame specific new technology for giving you this opportunity. I don't think it's just about that. It's just because we exist within the space and that's what it does to us.
Sure.
But unfortunately, I feel like it has lots of impact on the way people show, like, physical love.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you talking about performative affection?
In a way, yeah, that sometimes I've noticed that a lot. Okay, maybe that's time to say it. I'm Russian. So I've noticed that a lot during this whole conflict, which takes place nowadays, that sometimes people want to participate, but they obviously have certain fears and they have their private property and they have their life, which is also should be respected, I feel like. And sometimes they do an action within the digital environment, and it feels to a certain extent enough, because you know that you're not fully involved in that conflict and it's not actually your business. So you do a certain type of action on Instagram, and then it feels enough. And yeah, I just feel like it's a matter of fact in a way that sometimes people just rely on those like tiny actions that they're taking online.
Yeah.
And then the physical participation is just being skipped as a stage.
But that has really become a reality, especially with social media. This whole performative militancy that just doing one post or resharing something and not actually doing something physical.
Virtue
is enough.
signaling.
Virtue
in
signaling.
The bigger in the bigger sense.
I mean, it has goodness in it by itself, right? Like,
Yes, of course.
I mean, like, because it's like the medium of social media is such a spectrum that really, like, gives so many different kind of things. I personally prefer a person to be a performative for kindness than, like,
Also true, yeah.
for evil things, because people are using it to produce so much evil in this world. But it's really, really such a critical things as well. Like, to really investigate the level of privilege that we have, and then to what extent we're just, using it, just on the social media, sharing a few things might probably seems to be enough, or sharing this information and creating awareness and everything. But also we should able to have the capacity to develop, like, is it really enough?
Yeah, but I also feel like privilege is, just because of the fact that it comes mostly from the American context. And we've observed that the word privilege was used for a couple of years already constantly by different social groups and different social groups. But I, at a certain point, I've noticed that I think this term needs to be explained also within diverse contexts, because like I feel like people in Europe and people in third world countries are using this term as if they're Americans, which is very far away from who they actually are. And I've also noticed it myself while being Russian, for example, because I know that this term in my context should be used in a completely different manner.
But what term are you talking about exactly?
Privilege.
Privilege.
Yeah, because it's obviously in my context we can talk about my privilege as a white person, but it's tiny bit hard to articulate this term on other levels within my context. So I think it needs to be just specified, dedicated to each context.
We
where it's being
do
used.
live in a society world where we are very much influenced by the United States. So even like global human rights are seen as what the Americans or the United States are putting out, because Americans are
Well, as a
more
standard.
than it's a
standard is
It's
a
a
good
standard,
word,
but
But even in a historical context, you can't really compare a social rights movement of the late 60s, which is somehow ingrained in all of our minds as the be-all, end-all of like social liberation, of sexual liberation, of feminism. The late 60s, you can't apply that to anything but the United States.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we relate to it on a
exactly.
conceptual level,
We
but
relate
not
to it on a conceptual
the
level because
historical.
it is the standard that we should apply to. But no, just as a fact, not as a lived experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, like for me, like this is also like I'm so happy that you just brought that up, because I also see it like at the moment is also like America is such an imperialistic state.
America.
Yeah, right. Like it's such an imperialistic, and like the way even I sound is so affected by it. You see, but it's such an imperialistic.
America made you do that right now.
It's absolutely. Damn you, America! How could you?
The United States.
Mr. Biden, do you hear us?
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And then, but like the reality of this imperialistic element, how it's also really like migrate into the consciousness, right? Like the consciousness being political, advocating for freedom and liberations and all these kind of things and all that. As when you were saying in the 60s and everything, in the 60s so many amazing things were also happening in the rest of the world, like for instance the Africa Union, all these African liberty states were doing so many amazing things. Even if we go in on a queer setting, just to just be I know I'm quoting another imperialistic state, but but like, for instance, UK, like, for instance, the black queer movement in UK in the 60s was like really super organized and really like, so good, but still not covered in our consciousness, right? Because still the imperialistic agenda of America was like, super past that. And but at the same time also like, this idea of also using this word privilege, I think we always used it in a context of shaming people. But like, for me, like, the work that I do as an activist, as an advocate, is about to secure that privilege to everybody. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, as a person who's visibly able-bodied, if I do not see my privilege as that, and really like, just be like, do the homework of like, to be used as an instrument and tool for other, like both visibly and invisibly disabled body, for instance, then I'm, not really understanding the word of like what privilege is. But it played the like how we use it, the word, like, most of the time we're using it to shame people.
No, that's true. And like that's also what, yeah, I mean, that's just a matter of fact also. But sometimes I feel like that if that would be explained to people that actually are capable of using it in a good manner and do something good about it, that would be probably more productive than just stopping at the stage of shame, because unfortunately shame is a great thing to show the results of your actions, but unfortunately it's not really productive, so it just makes processes stop.
But at the same time, I think nowadays
Still needed.
it's still needed, but I can call out someone for their privilege. That might be seen as shame, but it's not on me to educate this person what to do with their privilege. Living in 2022 with the internet and the amount of information we have, it's on this person to inform themselves on how their privilege affects the people around them and how they can use it for good.
But one thing, you're right. But I also think that you're more right in a context where economy and politics is functioning well. Because I believe that, I think we had this conversation even with Nanouk at a certain point, that when I was introduced in this whole movement, I was completely, I could agree with it, but unfortunately, coming from my background, I couldn't fully, because I know that for people to be able to educate themselves, they need to have a certain amount of skills that allow them to do that. And when the government, family, context, different reasons are not giving you those tools, it's obviously on you, yes? But it's a more complex problem than just saying that it's you just don't educate yourself. Sometimes there are contexts that are lacking education so much, and people are just existing within their bubble, which is not giving them any tools to learn how to do it. And at that stage, I unfortunately cannot agree anymore, because I'm coming from one of those.
But how does one break out of that bubble?
Well, like I think for me, it's like, the applicability of like, for instance, calling out and calling in. For me, it's like, it goes into also like to our point, which is like, to whom I'm in community with, like, for instance, like, if all of us are in the same community, for me, it is really going to be like, such an egoistic things and a detriment to what I wanted to do. And I'm using the word of like, shaming and calling out within each other, like to the context and to the constitutions that I consider my community, my communal space. Then like, I prefer to just like, do the the work of calling in, which also like, include a little bit of education. But when it is like to a larger, like, for instance, like, if a like, for Jeff Bezos, I absolutely have zero interest in doing that.
But let me say one thing. In terms of, like, for example, I've been with Masha through like a somewhat amount of time, and I've seen what is happening. And there is just to like have like a little link to the topic is like the way Masha presented, the way Masha existed in the world, identified something that was very easily turned into like, yeah, but why don't you get it? You are this person, why don't you get it? And there's a very stark difference between intellectual capacity and lived experience. And that's the point where shame doesn't do anything, because shame will alienate the people you're trying to educate, because lived experience and feeling empathy is something that will, change minds for good.
Yeah, I think shame has its one purpose, which is like, to
Yeah.
shame has like, shame in all
shame's
in all
the-
of its
one of the
cases,
biggest
what
tools
it
of
does
oppression.
is just like,
Yeah.
what it does is just like, to silence people and to also to stop them to
And
do
it
whatever they're
unfortunately-
doing.
yeah.
But like, like the question for me is, where is it applicable?
Yeah, because it also unfortunately produces lots of aggression towards the person who made an act. And that's exactly why all the people that are being nowadays, again, it's not an excuse, but that's just the basic explanation of why when people are being called out because they say something racist and they think it's not racist, they produce even more aggression because they do not understand on the first place what they've just said, and then they're being called out, and then it just produces another reaction, and there's no educational process going on. I'm not saying that we have to take all the people that are having very questionable mindset and start educating them, because it's never going to work out. But I believe that sometimes there are situations where people are having mental capacity to listen, and you have to take that and be like, okay, right now, I'm going to explain only to you what is happening, because I see that you can understand. And it's, I think, sometimes a missed opportunity to not use that chance to explain it to a person that can potentially could be changed and potentially could be educated in a certain manner. And I think this whole process of like shaming and generalizing and so on is just,
That is very true, but like it goes into like also the topic. Like I think for me it's very important, like, to whom I am being communal. Like, for you to take somebody else and really like, bring into that space of like, okay, I'm going to have a one-on-one conversations with you about regarding in this topic so that you can learn, because you're messing up. Because in this understanding and concept, there is a level of being in community, right? So like, for me, or like for anybody else, it's really difficult, like, for instance, to have that kind of like, tagging and really like, saying a person that is fully capable and equipped to stab me and kill me. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
So it's like it goes into the context. It goes into the constitutions of like, to whom I am doing that.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I was also very, very humanistic in my speech, because obviously sometimes there's been such a huge amount of years of oppression that people need to speak and be angry and express their emotions the way they want to do it, because the opportunity was taken from them. But yeah, I guess I was talking more about private context, because sometimes you observe those calling out situations even within your private circle. And that also sometimes confuses me a lot when we're sitting at the same table and we are sharing the same opinions. And then we're calling each other out, and I'm just questioning for what reason.
Yeah.
Which
What
is,
was the reason,
no,
bitch?
but which is, and I think I'm going to say this for all of us, which is a common identifier for all of our groups. This forced sort of need to call other people out within your group, which has, of course, its benefits in some regards, but overall, it is a tool of oppression and it is a tool of hierarchy, because we're dealing with hierarchical structures of who is most knowledgeable, which is
Elitism.
exactly
Which is class.
Which is class.
Da-da-da. You know, it goes into education and everything.
We are looped. There is no way out.
But that is one of my most contended points, I would say, in my personal life, is exactly this anguish about always being in this middle spot where you're leaving yourself as a... Wait, let me try to figure it out how I want to say it. Where it's... Do you want to follow the responsibility you see for yourself to be the one calling out, to be the one enacting force? Or do you want to leave the soft space that Faris, you're always talking about, you know? Because in many times there is nothing to be gained from being the intellectual oppressor, you know?
Please.
No, I'm just thinking because, like, I'm not so sure if I would agree on this, like, that in all our communities we have the tendency to call out, but maybe I'm just thinking out loud, because I think maybe for me there is a difference in calling out and, like, or argumenting or like advising, educating. I think for me, calling out has some kind of harshness and aggression, and it could be different for me. Like a soft way is to argument, but rather like to seek a conversation. Maybe like it is a different.
That's a very interesting, like in terms of terminology. Yeah. I totally see what you're saying. I think the way I wanted to formulate it is because that is a point of pain in my life, that I see a lot of calling out, and I think it is not right.
Like I think it's also like for me, I just wanted to mention this, like, you know, I was reading this book, we cannot cancel each other, or you cannot cancel us, by Adriana Mary, and it's like I was like really like, you know, it was such an important pocket book for me. I'm also like now also by Patrice, like 12 step of how to be abolitionist, because it goes into like, you know, the idea of also like, you know, calling out or calling in, and like, you know, giving an advice, or like, you know, all this dominance kind of things is actually really goes into also like, you know, the violence each and every one of us are subjected to. Yeah. Because in these systems, in this world that we're living, that we're being coerced and that we're being conditions, and there is like, you know, all of these mechanisms has a practicality of repetitions that really like, you know, be part of who we are, and it's just built from there, right? And then there is a huge tendency of repeating that, and like, you know, just going through that. So in these intentions of like, you know, oh, I need to stop these oppressions by any means necessary, we are failing to just stop ourselves and then say like, you know, okay, I am trying to end dominations, but how am I going? Which kind of directions and tools that I'm using to end this domination? Am I perpetuating to become the dominator
Exactly.
in this
That's what I'm.
context?
Yes.
Or am I just fully going to be fully abolitionist? And even if a person cause me an harm, an abuse, and all of this, to what level I am being a restorative person, an abolitionist, and saying I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to be punitive, but I'm here to just to be vulnerable with this pain and harms that you cause me, and showing it to you, and in a potential of I know there is a potential also that you might probably continue to harm me. But in all of this, where can we reach? Where can we meet? Where this things is going to end?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's super important to focus. I mean, that's why I was mentioning that, to focus on the process and not on the outcome. Because I mean, there's also this. I forgot how is it translate. I think it's a history of a German man, or of a single German man, something like that. Anyways, there's a very nice book. I mean, it's not nice, it's quite harsh. A book about how Germany came to where they are. Yeah. And it's about the beginning of the whole Nazi movement. And because for me, at a certain point, it was very important to understand how a nation that look the way it looks right now came to that point. Because it's really, really hard to build a connection without knowing properly the historical facts of how Nazi Germany was transformed into the current state of their society. And this book very beautifully explains how you can live your life and just have a simple desire to not ruin it with all these complicated political processes, and how sometimes you just want to save this, save space for yourself and meet your lovers and go to the clubs and to the restaurants where you used to go. And then something changes in the society completely. And you're just having this tiny bit of a moment of ignorance that causes you a lot, that causes you death of your friends, that causes you a complete change of your lifestyle, that brings you a war. And it very, very nicely explains this very, very smooth transition. It is incredibly smooth.
It's
And
unnoticeable.
It's unnoticeable almost. And because nowadays we just talk about it as a matter of fact. Okay, there was Nazi Germany, and yeah.
But the transition is so
Yeah.
smooth and so
yeah.
unnoticeable that there is no distinction between past and.
Yeah, and how all these people you believed in, and how all these people you shared the same mindset with are slowly disappearing, and how you as a person who had completely different values in life is being forced to participate in different activities that you never wanted in your life. And it's very, the right word is that it's very smooth, and that's why it's so important to know how those processes are happening, and that's why it's so important to explain to the person why you are so hurt, and not just come with an outcome and say that's what you have to deal with, and not explain why the person should deal with it.
Exactly, because at one point you lose the connection point and you
You
are.
just become angry because
Exactly.
you're being attacked. So
Exactly.
But also, I think it is absolutely very important to also, guarantee and to affirm the validity of, people who are abused and harmed, and
Yeah, of course, of course.
all this pain is, caused on them. It's absolutely. I mean, when we're doing meditation, mediation, when we're doing also trying to just bring peoples into a space of understanding where hurt really happens with one another and everything. It's also like, as we are also discussing this, it's like, for me, it's also like very important to also just bring this aspect of it. It is absolutely very important that like there is the affirmations and the validity of the pain that people go through, and then and then they might probably be like at the space of like where the only way they can just get their point across is by yelling and by really like being aggressive, because they've tried so many different ways and routes to be heard.
Something that really resonates with me, what Faris just said, is that for me, it's not the job of the oppressed to educate. I'm not even saying the oppressor, but it's not the job of the oppressed or sick or the harmed to educate, because they've already lived through enough. It's on the job of the other to educate.
But just
themselves.
sometimes people have capacity, let's
Yes,
say,
of
for
course,
that, and
of
that's why
course.
they do it, and it's super important and great.
This is why we always
But,
talk
yeah.
about soft space versus safe space. Is you have to find the softness in yourself to, realize who is capable.
Yeah.
Because it's like this system that is dominating us. Part of it also like what it does is also it takes away our capacity as a human beings, that we have to hurt one another.
Yeah.
Because it's like as a marginalized body, oftentimes we are like sanctify ourselves and say like oh, we can't hurt each other, but like that's not true. That is the delusions of these oppressions that really like marginalized to begin with. And like and then because of that delusions, we lead ourselves with an understanding of like oh, we cannot hurt each other. And then when we do hurt each other, then we destroy each other. Then the idea of like this dominating power, which is the divide and conquer, would come in. Then like because there is this hurt happening from the space that I called mine, the space that I called my community. And like if it is that, then like hurt is hurt at the end of the day, wherever it comes from. And so like so fuck these community things.
And unfortunately, oppression also has a tendency to repeat itself within the community of
exactly.
oppressed ones.
Because
And that's the most fucked up part.
I can say that about myself, and I'm gonna ask the question into the round. It's like I have felt that way about the communities I feel a part of. Is this sense of alienation, this sense of stop, why is this violence happening? And me trying to navigate how to use my energy to bring it back to a softness.
Yeah, because there's unfortunately sometimes no space in between one oppression and another.
Exactly.
There's like the oppression is happening, people are being oppressed, and then the ones that are being oppressed are not having time, space, resources, capacity, education to have this moment of realization of what have just happened. And then they're replicating the same mechanism towards their own members, and it's unfortunately being done in very various manners.
That is one aspect of it, and then the other aspect of it is also like the very raw nature of who we are is like it's a spectrum of so many different kind of things, right? It's goodness, it's badness, it's like all of this, so many things originates within us. And then like for me, it's also like it's the mechanisms and the agenda of this white supremacist capitalist patriarchic violence. That's the agenda of it. Like just picturing me as this entity, as this body that really originates so many different kind of things, to just picture me as only kind or soft and incapable of hurting another beings, because it is about ability. It's taking away that ability, right?
Intellectual ability, even.
Intellectual ability, physical ability, you name it.
Exactly.
It goes into the same violence. For me, I see it the same way that, as me being hurted by other, also the same way me be pictured as I'm incapable of hurting other human being. For me, is the same violence for me as
100%.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a very roundabout question, sort of, is because a part of what our discussion should be about, because we're working on a bigger topic, is if you take a second to take in what we just talked about, what would be your... Let's not even go too far. Let's go 5 years. Let's go 5 years from now. What are the things you wish to not talk about 5 years from now? Which are the things that are immediate? And I'm asking you, Faris, specifically.
Oh, you're asking me specifically?
Yeah. You can do 10 years, don't worry.
No. I'm
just to arrive at a point where we are talking about our utopian visions, because I think, in a way, we're sitting around here in a very privileged round of having a lot of intellectual capacity, realizing the state of where we're at. But I don't think we often allow ourselves to romanticize what could be. And I think it is important to find the joy in romanticizing what we could be.
Why is it important?
Well, because you should experience that sort of... Well, it's not affirmations. I think you should... It's about hope.
I mean, also, the context of also, how we do understand romanticizations is also, somehow a little bit manipulated also by the body that oppresses us as well.
Romanticization maybe is not the right word.
No.
But I'm
why
talking
not?
about
Let's romanticize
hope.
Honey.
Let's
Why
not
not?
cancel all the words. We need to speak.
No, yeah.
But hope.
Yeah. But to come to your question, for me, it's 5 years, 10 years, or tomorrow, or after a fraction of second, even here, is my aspirations, my utopia is also is also about creating this capacity to talk about anything and everything, and to bring that all of that things into the table, and then with no hesitations or with no questioning myself, there would be a repercussion for me saying this kind of things or not, is my imagination. Because you ask me, what would you not want to talk about? I don't know, girl. In 5 years and everything, I don't know what I want or do not want to talk about. But whatever that I'm experiencing, that whatever that is pressing me, or whatever that is giving me joy, whatever that is giving me a sensation of curiosity, I am imagining myself and my fellow my fellow human beings and siblings and quibbling and you name it.
Nibblings.
Nibblings.
Nibblings, non-binary
and-
siblings.
So it's all of these bodies to have the space, the capacity to just bring their authentic selves in any ways, and express it and bring it to the tables, and then that being seen and with its validity, and that is being seen as a valid reality, and then each and every one of us developing a capacity and a technology to process all of that without harming one another for it. So that's my imagination. It can be like tomorrow or 5 years or 10 years, and we can literally talk about anything. And for us to have that technology and capacity, not to really like drain or be harm.
Sure. Like, for example, just to do like a personal example, for example, like and even next year, let's see what happens. But I would not like to talk about. I would not like to talk about gender in the way that I'm talking about it right now, in terms of like, for example, why I chose they them pronouns or no pronouns, even though my representation might be cis looking, you know. I know the bubble that I'm in perfectly understands the difference, you know. But I'm still, even my mother, for example, understands the difference. She wouldn't use they them pronouns for me, don't get me wrong, but but she understands. She uses they them pronouns for other people. She doesn't use they them pronouns for me, but for other people. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening.
She'll be like, not my child.
We love you, Susie.
We love you, Susie. But 5 years from now, I see my space of employment not having that discussion anymore, you know? Because it's like steps. It's bubble, expanded bubble, extended bubble, and then sort of like actually influencing your everyday life.
Yeah. I mean, the expansions of that bubble is also my aspirations.
That's exactly what I mean. Like, that is my wish for the next years.
Totally, I totally get it. But yeah, and basically, to sum up also on your context of, what I said is about, for me, to I don't know, my all the times when I wish and imagine and everything, so I'm more intro perspective to myself, and then I imagine a space where I would just be I just going to be me, and then people might probably question it or not, or really I don't care, but for me. To develop that that capacity where where people can just literally sit with that question with themselves, and then really process it and analyze it and everything, without producing violence towards me. I'm boo boo, amazing, you're really having an issue with that, sit with it, honey. And then goes into what you said, Gabi. Educate yourself is 2020, or now it's 2040. Now by that time is Google is literally hugging you. I do not know, or giving you some soup and feeding you. But have that talk with that Miss thing,
Sure.
Miss Googles and everything. But leave me the fuck alone.
But let's be realistic. We're just gonna reach the stage when we don't care.
Yes and no. But for example, the first thing that comes in, another first thing that comes into my head, second thing in this case, other than pronouns, is for example, the bisexual community.
Oh.
I'm sorry about I'm not trying to be biphobic, but there is no such a thing. Now it's now because with the gender.
Oh my God! Stop it!
No.
We're gonna cut that.
No, please keep it. No, I'm not biphobic.
Everyone, goodbye.
But I'm trying to interject also, because the idea of also this bi-ness is also very, very binary understanding.
True. 100%. Right? Sure.
So it's in my imaginations, as we are going.
Something positive though, Faris.
We're back.
No, but we really need to challenge that positivity with really.
Let me just say, 5 years ago, we were basically there was a consensus about like bi people can't decide, bi people are greedy.
It comes from pain, from a very painful space.
Well, it doesn't really matter. We've progressed.
yeah.
In our bubble, let me say that straight people still think, oh, bisexuals are up for threesomes.
Sassy.
You know, there's still like a very big gradient.
Yeah.
And
but
this
like, you know,
is-
but now we progress into pansexual, honey.
Yeah,
That's what I meant.
My
It's
vibe,
you know,
that's how I
now we're
identify.
talking about pansexual. Yeah?
We came back to the topic of love. We just love people.
We just love people.
Gabi's like, that's
yeah.
why I'm pansexual.
That's a huge discourse, is all I'm saying. But like 2 years from now, I want to have less of that discourse about bisexual people don't owe you any explanation.
No, like for me, bisexual people never owe anybody an explanation.
No one,
period.
Of course not.
No one owns anyone any
Yes,
explanation.
period.
Full
I know
stop.
some people an explanation about my behavior, but that's a different story.
No, but actually talking about binary, I mean, that's the thing. For example, now coming back to gender, because like I still identify as a woman, but actually I wish for the next years not to.
Why did you do this move? Yeah. Nook?
Oh, because of the word still. I still identify as a woman. That I think.
Yeah, but maybe that's the thing, because my aspiration would be not to always say that, because I think I now kind of, that's why I say still, because I identify as a woman, but I wish that, yeah, those terms wouldn't exist anymore, wouldn't matter so much, but I have the feeling that it still does matter, and that's why I kind of also am reinforcing this queer feminist topic, because I think there is still the binary system, and that's why it's important for me to identify as a woman.
Sure, but that's in some way, shape, or form. Although I'm very sorry to bring up a very recent hip word, but that's a little bit on like heterofatalism, which, yeah.
What is that? That's
Bitch is
new.
dying. Bitch is dying.
Heterofatalism in the sense of like being so aware of the gender binary and of the fate of women that there is little hope left. That's why we use fatalism.
Fate of women.
Is dying.
Women
Well,
sounds-
in the sense of like women in a construct of a female
No, I
masculine
understood.
relationship, you know. So that's why the term heterofatalism is kind of like in pop culture happening at the moment. Is like women realizing it's kind of a lost game, you know. At the end of at the end of the day, I still like men, and men are shit, which is no. That's a critique on the term heterofatalism, and because that is actually not what anybody should aim for. It's not seeing things in fatalist terms. It's like love the fact that you identify as a woman, and love the fact that you identify as hetero.
Very, very, like, you know, very that, because it's
and
like,
if the men you are around with, you would say there is an aspect of masculinity that is detrimental. I don't want to use the word toxic, but you know, then maybe a lot of this discourse about hetero-pessimism, hetero-fatalism, hetero-miserabilism, all of those words are happening, is a lot of like realize that masculinity is not a be-all, end-all, and that there is also masculinity that is soft. There is masculinity that is okay.
I mean, like, you know, masculinity is soft. It was really like, you know, diluted and really like manipulated by patriarchy. So it's like, you know, but like, you know, when we talk about patriarchy also, like, you know, patriarchy also manifests in femininity as well. right?
100%.
So it's like, so
That's why heterofederalism. It's
but,
like the gender binary is detrimental to both parties.
But also, like, when we talk about the gender binary and then the non-binariness, like, I think it is absolutely very important. Also, the non-binary actually is also like an indications of the fluidity of, like, of existence, which include binaries, because non-binary does include binary. But like, it's just an indications of, like, the from the theory and educations and an understanding of, like, things only exist with plus or minus or 0 and 1, or, like, into these two extremes, rather these extremes, but also into these movements and spectrums of these spectrums.
But to be honest, I hear for
extremes.
the first time that non-binary includes binary.
Non-binary includes binary, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, because non-binary is so big and it's so fluid and so vast. And, like, it includes so many things, including binaries. So, like, the idea of, like, seeing also, like, non-binary concept is trying to erase binary is actually, like, from the educations that try to create fear into the bodies and the understanding that holds binariness, to really, like, reject non-binariness. But non-binary include binary.
But I mean, that's also like when you were speaking and you used the term like masculinity and femininity and so on. I mean, I feel like that it's actually like a very beautiful tendency of, like, I mean, I see some romanticism in it that maybe some people don't see, but on a linguistic level, I feel it's very beautiful that people are changing the terms, because at a certain point they understand that a certain term is so drowned within certain connotations that it's just almost impossible to get rid of them. And then the word is just being replaced with a term that has a broader spectrum of meanings. And probably that term is also going to die one day and going to be replaced with something else. But like when you were speaking about such a fluid things and then you used the term masculinity, my ear was very irritated because I was, again, drowning in all the connotations that you're kind of like standing against. And then you're using this word in a positive sense. But unfortunately, it's already quite hard within this discussion to use the term masculinity, whatever.
In a positive way.
In a positive way.
But
we really have to challenge ourselves and use it in a positive way.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Masculinity is a reality.
Yes.
It's an existence that we really have to also embrace.
Yes.
But like that's why also like the topic is also like toxic masculinity, because masculinity by itself is not a problem.
But
it's
masculinity itself has turned into, even though if we don't think about it, we hear masculinity and we think toxic masculinity.
So, but then maybe coming back, so what do you aspire then in 10 years? Like, do you still want to use that term, or do you want to have another connotation for that term? That's like maybe what, like why I was thinking about it. Yeah.
I think maybe in, let's say, in a utopian 10 years from now, maybe it will be great because, yes, masculinity is now very perceived as something toxic, something negative. But in 10 years from now, having this toxicity out of this concept of masculinity, that masculinity is not, yes, the way we are living our world now, it is very toxic, but how can we transform masculinity to be something more soft, something more emotional, something more caring?
To link into that, like femininity is starting to have a toxic connotation too, which has to be realized. Like when we're talking about femininity, we're also talking about toxic femininity, even though that's not the discourse that we're having. Let me finish.
Yeah, of course.
The man says to the woman, "Let me finish.
Let me speak up.
In 10 years, I wish I have a husband and a car and
Two children,
and two kids.
a woman, a woman."
Cut it off.
So of course, I think we need to get to a point where I think it's a point of rhetoric, right? We assign certain traits to femininity and we assign certain traits to masculinity.
And that's on binary.
And that's on the binary, exactly. So realistically, if we start to dismantle the rhetoric about traits, we dismantle the bigger notion of femininity and masculinity. Yeah. Because if women don't get complimented on their strength in business as a outlier, but as a just fact, then we're starting to dismantle things. Yeah. And if we're talking about the masculinity and say, oh wow, you're so not like a dude for being so kind and caring about the people around you, then we're starting to dismantle masculinity.
Yeah. I mean, what I think 10 years from now, I think maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're all talking about is in 10 years from now, I wish we could talk. Remember when we used to talk about the patriarchy?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, remember, like that be extrapolate society out of this concept. And I know this is very much redundant of saying down with the patriarchy, but it's something like, but and going away from this gender discussion, like for example, for me, it has to do in 10 years from now, I wish the communal identifier of what color one's passport is, I wish that to not be a problem. I wish for in 10 years, there is no more refugee status. That because these people come from XY parts of the world. Yeah. And that all in all has to do with this patriarchal system of I'm in power, you're not. Mm-hmm. I decide, I'm in power, so I decide you are in, you are out. This is how a man behaves, this is how a woman behaves, this is what it is. I mean, if we're talking about utopian, futuristic ideals, then for me, that's it.
Only one thing, I don't know, I feel like we're also being very pretentious in a way when we
That's always the thing. Every time we have one of these discussions, one person says, but listen, what's that? We are the pretentious people.
No, I actually wanted to talk about different. I feel like we sound very pretentious. I mean, pretentious is not the right word. It's just like
I feel attacked.
No.
I'm kidding.
No,
I'm looking at you,
Nobody's
Faris.
attacked in the safe space. No. When we use the word toxic, because I feel like toxic people use toxic.
Period.
Word
100%.
toxic a lot. And I feel like you have to be very much you have to be a person who understands a lot about yourself to call something toxic, because I've just noticed it in the conversations. You're coming to a person and you talk about your private life or about actions that you took, and then, or the actions that were taken by another person, and then they're being called toxic. Yeah. Which is, again, coming back to the conversation about processes and outcome. It is toxic as an outcome, but unfortunately that does not really describe the reasoning and couple of other things.
I mean, like, I totally, because just to say that, like, that, like, literally, I am, like, going through, like, a process of, like, where, like, a toxic person literally use toxic. So
I'm sorry.
many
Every time you say
times.
toxic, all I think about is Britney Spears.
But, like, the person was, like, using it so many times.
I'm slipping under.
What?
I'm slipping under, and that's on, and that's on that.
No, it's always very beautiful when the world find the terms that can cover a very big amount of things, but sometimes it's like getting so much into the everyday reality that sometimes it's being used, I feel, in a very hypercritical manner.
100%. I'll say one thing.
Very true.
The speed we are in as a society about terms has
It's beyond us.
It's beyond us. Like terms have a very quick exchange rate. Toxic is in our vocabulary for some time. So there is a sort of validity to it, I would say. But having said that, is what you're saying is absolutely right. The speed in which we're processing things has gone up a lot. The thing is, how can we actually... I think that goes back to, like, let's say 45 minutes ago, is like, how fast are we at actually catching up when we're talking about privilege, for example? You know, it's like we're talking about privilege, but we're not realizing our own privilege. We're talking about toxicity, not realizing how toxic we are ourselves. And I think that is something that we need to look at.
But that's not true. I think we are all talking about our own traits also constantly. This is not true. I mean, it's just a very official type of conversation that people don't know who we are and how we live our lives, but it's not true. I mean, you reflect a lot on how toxic sometimes you behave.
Exactly.
I can prove that.
I do. Wait.
No, I'm just being drama queen. I was like, oh, she said that. Y'all heard?
I really am, and I would say that is a detrimental factor to my own personal life. Like, I reflect on how toxic I am too much.
But also for me, it's
This
also
is not
goes.
psychotherapy.
No, but also no. It can be.
girl.
It can be.
I would have not.
It can be. No, we can call it calling you in because it's safer around here.
Oh, not a tongue pop.
But what I wanted to say is, one, it goes also like, it goes what I was like saying also, as a human being, our like taking away our ability. So like for me, how I see it also is all of these things being taken away from our natural and raw body of being, but like by necropolitics of these systems that really like manage who lives, who dies, and all of this kind of things. And like while we know femininity, while we know masculinity is something that like in us and like part of who we are, because of this cohesions and educations and like necropolitics system, it is taking away its natural reality and then turn it into something very unnatural and very systematic and very like mechanized way. So for me, the utopian space I really wanted to imagine is each and every one of us really understanding these mechanisms, how it operates, and really going into our very innate natures of who we are and really being in touch with that and really like understanding the mechanism of these oppressions that is turning nature into very so nature and so mechanism and systematic to hurt one another.
Yeah, but that deals a lot with what also, I mean, I ironically said about not caring, because I mean, it sounds harsh, but in the end of the day, that's a coping mechanism of finding like your true self sometimes and realizing what is right for you. And then I'm not saying to stop fighting, but it's just more, peace.
There is a realization of like, and I think we are facing this on the daily. It's sort of a realization what are our aspirations, right? And if we realize our aspirations, regardless of how over we are, right, then we have that little bit more strength to care and decide that not caring doesn't progress us. That's, it is you have to be very soft with yourself to navigate that each and every day.
How far away we went from the original topic.
I think we're still right there.
No, because you mentioned care at the beginning about communal identifiers. So I think that is one.
No, I think we're really on our topic. Yeah.
Yeah. And by this, I want to say, hey, thank you, everybody that was involved in this conversation. I was pretty inspired, and I have lots to think about. And I want to say thank you to Kim, and thank you to Faris, and Gabi, and Masha.
And Nanouk.
Oh, thank you.
And Nanouk.
And Bashi.
And me, myself.
And Bashi.
Oh, Bash.
And I hope this conversation leaves some sort of impression on us. Our next topic, hosted by Kim, is going to be our communal anger. So expect outrage and tune in. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you for being a part of our world. Thank you.
Commons.